ENG3C, Grade 11 College Prep English. I'd like to welcome everyone listening across the North today at home, your learning center, or on Bell Express View. To call in and join our class today, you can call 1-800-465-7144 or 737-4017 or 2983 in the Sioux Lookout, Lac Seul, or Dryden areas. I'd like to welcome everyone back to class today. This is our last class of the week, and we are starting with Lesson 8 today. We are just afraid that we're going to finish reading Chapter 8 in To Kill a Mockingbird. We didn't quite finish that. Before we get started, a couple of announcements. I will be away next Wednesday. I will be traveling. I'm going to Deer Lake and to Keewaywin on Wednesday with Candace, Bonnie, Barb Matuzik, and Darren. So our class on Tuesday will be rescheduled, and it's been rescheduled for Tuesday. So instead of being our class is going to be canceled on Wednesday, it's rescheduled for Tuesday. So we're going to have a 2-hour class on Tuesday. We'll have class from 2 until 3, and then 3 until 4. So we're going to have a double class. That will let us make sure we make up the time that we missed and have everything completed as needed. So just keep that in mind. I'll remind you about it again on Monday again, and also email and Facebook and contact everyone that I can to remind them of it as well. So where we're starting off today, we're going to look at Lesson 8. And I expect that we'll probably have this entire unit done. I would expect no later than the middle of the week after next. So we should have all this done by the March break. And then we will probably get started probably with Lesson 11, I'm assuming, before March break. And then we will do the rest of Unit 3 and quickly do Unit 4 when we come back from March break. The March break is the 15th. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong day there. It is the 16th to the 20th. The WASA office will be closed. And I will be traveling, so I will not be available for any help at all during that time. So, also, I'll let you know, I also will be away on the 13th of March as well. I'll be traveling as well. So we'll look at having everything done by the end of our course. And so we're going to pick up where we left off yesterday. And we left off almost all the way through Chapter 8. Now, this is a bit longer chapter. And we're at the bottom of page 93 right now. The bottom of page 93 in the novel you should have with you. Or it's up on the screen as well on Bridget at page 73. So we'll pick it right after. It's at the bottom there where it says smoke rolled off our house. We're starting with that paragraph there. So it said, smoke was rolling off our house, and Miss Rachel's house like a falling off a riverbank, and the men were pulling hoses towards them. Behind us, the fire truck from Abbotsville screamed around the curve and stopped in front of our house. That book, I said. What? That Tom Swift's book. It ain't mine. It's Dill's. Don't worry, Scout. Don't worry about it yet, said Jamie. Pointed. Look at yonder. In a group of neighbors, Atticus was standing in his hands in his overcoat pockets. He might have been watching a football game. Miss Mowdy was beside him. See there, he ain't worried yet. Waiting on top of one of the houses. He's too old. He'll break his neck. You think we ought to make him get our stuff out? Don't pester him. He'll know when it's time, said Jem. The Abbotsville fire truck began pumping water on our house. A man on the roof pointed to places that needed it most. I watched our absolute morphodite go black and crumble. Miss Bowdy's sun hat settled on top of the heap. I could not see her hedge clippers. In the heap between our houses, Miss Rachel's and Miss Mowdy's, the men had long ago shed coats and bathrobes. They worked in pajama tops and nightshirts stuffed into their pants. But I became aware that I was not slowly freezing where I stood. I was slowly freezing where I stood. Jem tried to keep me warm, but his arm was not enough. I pulled free of it and clutched my shoulders. By dancing a little, I could feel my feet. Another fire truck appeared and started for Miss Stephanie Crawford's. There was no hiding for another hose, and the men tried to soak her house with hand extinguishers. Miss Mowdy's tin roof quelled the flames. Roaring, the house collapsed. Fire gushed everywhere, followed by a flurry of blankets from men atop the adjacent houses, beating out sparks and burning chunks of wood. It was dawn before the men began to leave, first one by one, then in groups. They pushed the Macomb fire truck back to town. The Abbotsville truck departed. The third one remained. We found out the next day it had come from Clark's Ferry, 60 miles away. Jem and I slid across the street. Miss Mowdy was staring at the smoking black hole in her yard, and Atticus shook his head to tell us she didn't want to talk. He led us home, holding onto our shoulders to cross the icy street. He said Miss Mowdy would stay with Miss Stephanie for the time being. Anybody want some hot chocolate, he asked. I shouted when Atticus started to fire in the kitchen stove. As we drank our cocoa, I noticed Atticus looking at me first with curiosity, then with sternness. I thought I told you and didn't stay put, he said. Why, we did. We stayed. Then whose blanket is that? Blanket? Yes, ma'am, blanket. It isn't ours. I looked down and found myself clutching a brown woolen blanket I was wearing around my shoulders, squaw fashion. Atticus, I don't know, sir. I turned to Jem for an answer, but Jem was even more bewildered than I. He said he didn't know how it got there. We did exactly as he told us. We stood down by the rad that gate away from everybody and didn't move an inch. Jem stopped. Mr. Nathan was at the fire, he babbled. I saw him. He was tugging that mattress, Atticus, I swear. That's all right, son. Atticus grinned slowly. Looks like all of Macomb was out tonight, in one way or another. Jem, there's some wrapping paper in the pantry, I think. Go and get it, and we'll... Atticus, no, sir. Jem seemed to have lost his mind. He began pointing out our secrets right and left. He told her to disregard for my safety, if not his own. Omitting nothing, knothole, pants, and all. Mr. Nathan put cement in the tree, I guess, and he did stop us finding things. He's crazy, I reckon. I say, but Atticus, I swear to God, he ain't ever harmed us. He ain't ever hurt us. He could have cut my throat from ear to ear that night, but he tried to mend my pants instead. He ain't ever hurt us, Atticus. Atticus said, whoa, son. So gently I was greatly heartened. It was obvious that he had not followed the word Jem said. For all Atticus said was, you're right. We better keep this in the blanket to ourselves. Someday, maybe, a scout can think of recovering her up. Think who, I asked. Boo Radley. You were so busy looking at the fire, you didn't even know it when he put a blanket around you. My stomach turned to water. I nearly threw up when Jem held the blanket and crept towards me. He sneaked out of the house, turned around, sneaked up, and went like this. Atticus said dryly, don't let this inspire you to further glory, Jeremy. Jem scowled. Ain't gonna do nothing to him, but I watched the spark of fresh adventure leave his eyes. Just think, Scout, he said, if you turned around, you'd have seen him. Calpurnia woke us at noon. Atticus said we didn't need to go to school that day. We'd learn nothing after no sleep. Calpurnia said for us to try and clean up the front yard. Miss Molly's sun hat was suspended under a thin layer of ice, like a fly in amber. We had to dig under dirt for her hedge clippers. We found her in her backyard, gazing at her frozen charred azaleas. "We're bringing back your things, Miss Melly," said Jem. "We're awful sorry." Miss Melly looked around, and the shadow of her old grin crossed her face. "I always want a smaller house, Jem Finch. Gives me more yard. Just think, I'll have more for my azaleas now." "You ain't grieving, Miss Melly?" I asked, surprised. I considered her house was nearly all she had. "Grieving, child? Why, I hated that old cow barn. Thought of setting it afire 100 times myself so that they'd lock me up. But don't worry about me, Jim Louise Finch. There are always doing things you don't know about. There are ways to do things you don't know about. Why, I built me a little house and take me a couple of roomers and great stuff to have the finest yard in Alabama. Those bellend grass will look plain puny when I get started." Jim and I looked at each other. "How'd it catch, Miss Mowdy?" he asked. "I don't know, Jem. Probably the flue in the kitchen. I kept a fire in there last night for my potted plants. You had some unexpected company last night, Miss Jean Louise." "How do you know?" "Atticus told me on his way to town this morning. Tell you the truth, I'd like to have been with you, and I'd have had sense to turn around, too." Miss Mowdy puzzled me. With most of her possessions gone and her beloved yard a shambles, she still took a lively and cordial interest in Jem and my affairs. She must have seen my perplexity. She said, "The only thing I worried about last night was all the danger and commotion it caused. This whole neighborhood could have gone up. Mr. Avery will be in bed for a week. He's right stove up. He's too old to be doing things like that, and I told him so. As soon as I can get my hands clean and when Stephanie Crawford's not looking, I'll make him a lane cake. That Stephanie's been after my recipe for 30 years, and if she thinks I'll give it to her just because I'm staying with her, she's got another thing coming." I reflected that if Miss Mowdy broke down and gave it to her, Miss Stephanie could have followed anyways. Miss Mowdy had let me see it once. Among other things, the recipe called for 1 large cup of sugar. It was a still day. The air was so cold and clear, we heard the courthouse clock clank, rattle, and strain before it struck the hour. Miss Mowdy's nose was a color I'd never seen before, and I inquired about it. "I've been out here since 6 o'clock," she said. "Should be frozen by now." She held up her hands. A network of tiny lines crisscrossed her palms, brown with dirt and dried blood. "You've ruined them," said Jem. "Why don't you get a colored man? There's no sacrifice," in his voice he had. "Or scouting me, and we can help you." So I said, "Thank you, sir, but you've got a job of your own over there." She pointed to her yard. "Being our morphodite?" I said. "Shoot, we can rig him a jiffy." Miss Rice stared at me, her lips moving silently. Suddenly she put her head to her hands and whooped. When we left her, she was still chuckling. Jem said he didn't know what was the matter with her. That was just Miss Mowdy. So look at chapter 9 on Monday. And we'll get at chapter 9. Everything changes a bit in this novel. So looking at lesson 8. This is looking at how to write a formal business letter. So what you will do is you're going to be looking at a short story of a man who tries to do the right thing when he's confronted with a crime. He witnesses the crime, he tries to do the right thing, and then gets in trouble for it. So we're going to be a short story called Citizen's Arrest. So it is older, it's from 1966. It is newer than the Edgar Allan Poe stuff we read, but it still is almost 50 years old. But the story is really interesting and deals with a pretty big moral question. And how would you respond if you were put in that same situation? So it's called Citizen's Arrest by Charles Williford. So it was fairly late in the afternoon when I stopped by Gwynn's department store on my way home to look for some new fishing tackle. Gwynn's was the best store in the entire city. There are 3 full floors of everything imaginable. So I've always took my time shopping at Gwynn's. A man who's interested in the outdoors can spend several hours in there just looking around. My back was to the man at the counter. The thief, I should say, because I was looking at the shotguns in the rack behind the locked glass doors. He must have seen me, of course, but he didn't know, I suppose, so I could see his reflection in the glass doors where he stood at the next counter. There was no clerk in the immediate vicinity. There was just the 2 of us at this part of the store on the ground floor. Casually, as I watched him in the polished glass, he snatched a heavy letter off the counter and slipped it into the deep right-hand pocket of his green gabardine raincoat. I was pretty well shocked by this action. As a kid, I had pilfered a few things from 10-cent stores, pencils and nickel keychains, and once a 25-cent diamond ring. But this is the first time in my life I'd ever seen anybody deliberately steal something. And it was an expensive table letter. $75, not counting tax. Only a minute or 2 before, I examined the letter myself, thinking how masculine it would look on the desk in my office or on the coffee table in the bachelor's apartment. Of course, as a married man, I couldn't afford to pay that much money just for a cigarette lighter. It's a beautiful piece of work, a conversation piece, as they say in the magazine ads. It was a chromium-plated knight in armor, about 6 inches tall. When you flipped up the visor and the flame, a boot on the helmet, a butane flame flared inside the empty head, and there was your light. There had been a display of these lighters in the shining armor in the gift counter, and now as I big man sauntered towards the elevators, there was one less. If I'd had time to think things over, I think I'm inclined to believe now that I would have ignored the theft. As I've always said, there's none of my business, and nobody wants to get involved in a situation that's bound to be unpleasant. At that particular moment, a young clerk appeared out of nowhere. And asked me if I needed any help. I shook my head, then pointed my chin in the general direction of the elevators. See that man there with the green raincoat? I just saw him take one of those night table letters off the counter and put it into his pocket. You mean he stole it? In kind of a stage whisper. No. He said, he didn't say that. All I say, he put the letter into his pocket and then walked over to the elevators. The big man entered the elevator together with a teenage boy who badly needed a haircut, and the operator clanged the doors closed. Leclerc could have been more than 22 or 23, cleared his throat. I'm afraid, sir, that this sort of thing is outside my province. Would you mind talking to our floor manager, Mr. Levine? I shrugged my reply, but there was a stinging sensation in my stomach all the same. For mentioning the theft, I committed myself. I now knew that I had to go through with it no matter how unpleasant it turned out to be. The clerk soon returned with Mr. Levine, a squat, bald man in his early 40s. He wore a plastic name tag and a red carnation in the left lapel of his black silk suit coat. I briefly explained the theft to Mr. Levine. He pursed his lips, listened attentively, then checked out my store by going to the glass case of shotguns to prove himself that the gift counter was reflected perfectly in the polished surface. Would you be willing, Mr. Goranowski? Mr. Goranowski to appear in a court as a witness to this shoplifting? Provided, of course, that this is such the case. What do you mean if it is such the case? I told you I saw him take it. All you have to do is search him. You find it in the letter in his raincoat, the right-hand pocket. The case is cut and dried. Not exactly, sir. isn't quite so simple. He turned to the clerk, whose eyes were bright with excitement in Miller's voice. Call Mr. Celio. Ask him to join us here. The clerk laughed and said, steepled his fingers. Mr. Celio is our security officer, he explained. I don't want you to think we don't appreciate your reporting this matter, Mr. Goronsky. But we do. But Gwen can't afford to make a false accusation. As you said, there was no clerk in the vicinity at the time. And it's quite possible that the gentleman might have gone off to search for one. I snorted in disgust. Sure, if you can't find one on the second floor, maybe you'll find one on the third. It's possible, he said, seriously ignoring my tone of voice. Legally, you see, no theft is involved unless he actually leaves the store without paying for the item. He can still pay for the lighter or put it back on the counter before he leaves. Sure, I see. When I forget the whole thing. I'm sorry you even brought the matter up. No, please, I merely want to explain the technical points. We need your cooperation. It's Mr. Gwynn's policy to prosecute shoplifters. But you can't make charges about an airtight case and a reliable witness. If we arrest him within the store, all the man has to say is he was looking for a clerk. There isn't anything that we can do about it. He very well may be looking for a clerk. As is such the case, we could very easily lose the goodwill of a valuable customer. I understand. I'm a businessman myself. In fact, I hope I'm wrong. But if I'm not, you can count on me to appear in court, Mr. Levine. I've gone this far. We're driving by Mr. Celio. He was a slight, dark, and businesslike. He looked like a bank executive than a detective. I had a hunch that he had an important job at the Gwynn's. He's merely doubled as security officer. In a businesslike manner, he quietly took charge of the situation. I was directed to stand by the elevators and point out the thief when he came down. Mr. Levine was stationed at the center aisle. Mr. Celio took up his post by the Main Street entrance. If by chance shoplifter returned right after leaving the elevator towards the side of 37th Street, Mr. Levine could follow him out. Mr. Celio could dart out the main door and circle around the corner to meet the man outside on 37th Street. Mr. Celio explained the plan so smoothly. I supposed it was some kind of standing procedure that he'd used effectively before. The eager young clerk, much to his disgust, was sent back to work with Mr. Levine, but he wasn't needed. To my surprise, when I looked at my watch, only 10 minutes had passed since I reported the theft. The next 10 minutes, or much longer, as I waited by the elevators for the man in the green raincoat to reappear. He didn't look at me as he got off, and I pointed him out by holding my arm above my head. And as Mr. Celio had directed, he trailed the man down the wide aisle at a safe distance. Wherever he had a gun, this alarming thought, I dropped back a little farther, letting Mr. Levine get well ahead of me. Mr. Celio, who had picked up my signal, went out the front door as soon as we came where the man was going to use the Main Street exit. I could see Mr. Celio through the glass doors and look on the front sidewalk. He was pretending to fumble a cigarette out of a pack. A moment later, just about the time I reluctantly reached the Main Street doorway myself, Mr. Levine and Mr. Celio were escorting the big man back inside the store. Couldn't understand the man's attitude. He was smiling. He had a huge nose, crisscrossed with prominent blood veins, and had a large mouth too, which was probably looked bigger because it was missing several teeth. The four of us moved silently down the right side aisle, a short distance to avoid the blocking the doorway. For a strange moment, no one said anything. I'm sorry, sir, Mr. Celio said flatly but pleasantly. This gentleman claims he took a desk lighter off the counter, put it into your pocket without paying for it. I resented the way that Mr. Celio had shifted all responsibility onto me. The big man shrugged, and if anything, Gino smiled wide, but his bluish blood eyes weren't smiling. He looked at me. They're hard and cold as glass marbles. Is that right? He chuckled deep in his voice. Is this the lighter you mean? He took the chrome-plated knife out of his raincoat pocket. Yes, I clear. That's the one. He unbuttoned his raincoat, and after transferring the lighter to his left hand, dug into his pants pocket for his right hand. This, he paper to Mr. Celio, is my receipt for it. Mr. Celio examined the receipt, then passed it to Mr. Levine. The front man shot me a coldly furious look. Returned the slip paper to the man. The thief reached his check, his inside pocket, and brought out for his checkbook. If you like, I can show you the check stub as well. Mr. Celio shook his head and held his hands back before taking a checkbook. No, sir, it's quite all right, he said apologetically. Mr. Levine made for some effusive apologies for the store, which I thought were the circumstances were called for. But the big man cut him off with a middle of a long sentence. No harm done, he said, good naturedly. Not at all. In your place, I'd have checked too. In all probability, he qualified as Mark. It was my mistake, I said finally. I'm sorry I inconvenienced you. And then when Mr. Levine said anything to me, the big man stood there grinning. I turned on my heel and left the store, resolving then and there to never spend another dime in Gwyn's as long as I lived. There had been no mistake. I had seen him take the lighter, and there had been no clerks anywhere near us at the time. I stood beside my car at the curb with frustration, and I ran things over and over again in my mind. A trick of some kind had been pulled on three of us, but how the man had worked it was beyond my comprehension. I opened the door on the sidewalk side and slid across the seat. As I fastened my belt, a meaty hand opened the door, and the big man in the green raincoat grinned at me. He held out the shiny knife for inspection. Want to buy a nice table ladder, buddy? He said, chuckling deep in his throat. I'll let you have it without any tax. I swallowed twice and replied, I know you stole a lighter, but how did you get the receipt? Will you buy the lighter if I tell you? No, darn you, I won't give you 10 cents for it. Okay, Mr. Do-Gooder, he said cheerfully. I'll tell you anyways. This morning there were several lighters on the counter, and I bought one of them at 10 a.m. After stashing the first one in a safe place, I came back late this afternoon and got this one free. Unfortunately, you haven't seen me pick it up. I sure got this morning, however, so you were out for the second one. The store stays open until 9:30 tonight, and I had planned on coming back after dinner to get another one. So long as I took them one at a time, one to see as good as three, if you get my meaning. So I figure it, you ought to buy this one for me, because I can't come back for my third lighter. It cost you some money, fella. I've got mind to go back and tell Cecilia how you worked it. Really, come on then, I'll go with you. Get the heck out of here. He chuckled, slammed the door, and walked away. My fingers trembled as I lit a cigarette. There's no mistaking my reaction now. I was no longer frustrated. I was angry. If the man had been my size or smaller, I would have chased him after and knocked out the remainder of his front teeth. I was considered for a short moment telling the idea of how he even cheated. All they do was check their inventory remaining in their lighters. They couldn't do too many of them in stock. And they would find out they were one short. But after the cold way they treated me, I didn't feel like telling them anything. A policeman's head appeared at the car window. Is this your car, sir? Of course. Do you not please join me on the sidewalk? He walked around the front of my car and unfastened my seatbelt and sat back across the seat. I was more than a little puzzled. Take a look, he said, pointing at the curb where I joined the sidewalk. You're parked well into the red zone. This is interesting. Only the front bumper is in the zone. My wheels are well behind the red paint. I suppose a little leeway, a little tolerance. I'm not blocking the red zone in any way. Don't argue with me, sir, he said wearily, taking out a pad of tickets out of his pocket. Ordinarily, I'd just tell you to repark and move on. But this time I'm giving you a ticket. A good citizen in a green raincoat reported your violation to me at the corner just now. He's a gentleman about who had every right to be sorry. He'd say he told you were parked in the red zone, just as a favor, and you told him to go to hell. Now, sir, what is your name? So that is our short story. Now, that is the only short story for this lesson. There's only one this time, but we do have some activities we're going to work through and complete along the way. So first one we're looking at is some support questions. You can find these on page 40 of unit number 2. So, and once again, the suggested answers are at the back of the unit, but I don't want you to look at them until after you had a chance to at least try to answer the questions on your own. So the first one says, why does the narrator initially hesitate to become involved in the crime that he witnessed? So why do you not want to get involved? So that's one answers right in our novel, right in our short story, where he says that it's none of his business what happens, and that's bound to be an unpleasant situation. Our second question says when the narrator does become involved, what reason does he give for staying committed? Why does he keep doing it? And because he got involved because he's also a businessman. So he understands what it's like for business to lose money, and it's the reason why he got involved in the first place. So number 3 says, why does the thief get away with the crime? What happens? And he gets away with it because he'd already bought a lighter similar. He paid for a lighter earlier that day, and then he went back and stole that one. And with what the receipt that just says he bought it, there's nothing that they can do. He proves he bought it and hid it and got another one. Number 4, and this is where it gets a little bit interesting. So what would you have done in the same place as a narrator? Why or why not? So would you have reported it to the store, or would you have just let it go and said it's the store's fault for not having a clerk there buy those expensive lighters? So you want to keep that in mind. And there's no right or wrong answer to this question. All there is what is your opinion? What do you think? And what do you believe? And then our last question says, in the end of the story, is justice served? Consider both the narrator and the thief. So this context thing is, did both people get what they deserved? Did one get it and one not? Yes or no? So think about that. And think about what is justice. And we can think about that as what's right and what's wrong. I mean, getting the punishment that is deserved for a crime if you do commit a crime. So we can think about this. We can say justice wasn't really. No one really got justice. Not only was the narrator embarrassed by the store, but he also got a parking ticket because the true criminal, the man who stole it, got away with the crime, and he told a lie to the policeman to get him in trouble too. So you argue justice wasn't served at all in either case for either character. The thief got away, and the good Samaritan, the person who reported the crime, still got a parking ticket and got embarrassed. And you can find the suggested answers to those questions on page 67 of unit number 2. So next we're going to what's known as a business letter. Now this is something that you need to know how to write, because when you're applying for jobs, you're asking, maybe sometimes your band asking for a donation, or asking for donations for of any kind. You need to know how to write a formal business letter. So the business letter is a formal communication between an individual and a business, or between two businesses. It has both a specific structure and a specific style. So we're going to look at the structure now and explain different components, and that's where we'll probably end up ending today. We'll pick up the rest tomorrow if we get a chance to get through it. So look at the structure of the letter below. Each element of the letter is numbered with a corresponding explanation. So I'm going to just read through the whole letter first, then I'll come back and address what the numbers mean. So first you have an address, 123 Fake Street, Oshawa, Ontario, L1X 3M4. We have a date, April 1st, 2004. We have another address, Pete's Insurance Company, 1911 Morris Avenue, Oshawa, Ontario, L1M 7Z2. Dear Mr. Jones, I am writing with regards to file number 234, my auto insurance, which I've been carrying for the past 5 years. There was a problem with my balance. Your last correspondence indicated I had owing a balance of $76.54 as of March 25th, 2004. In fact, I sent a check to the amount on March 15th, 2004. The check was number 303, and it was cashed on March 20th, 2004. Please contact me as soon as possible to rectify the situation. Thank you for your patience, and I look forward to hearing from you at 905-444-7788. Sincerely, Jane Smith. So I'm going to leave it up there, and all the explanation is on page 42. So I'm going to leave the letter up, and I'll explain what those different areas mean. So number one, what that is your own mailing address. What is your address? You want to include that there. After a space, you want to have the date, and then looking for today's date, the date you wrote the letter. Just April, in this case, it was April 1st, 2004. The number 3 indicates the address of the person you are sending the letter to. So you're sending this letter to Pete's Insurance Company at 1511 Morris Avenue, Oshawa, Ontario, L1M 7Z2. That's where the letter is going. So all that, before even saying what you're writing about, is included in your letter. And all that is stated on the left margin, the left-hand side of the page. Number 4 is a salutation or a greeting. This should be as specific as possible. You know the exact person you have to write to, include that. Just ensure that I get a quick response. If you don't know who it is, say for example you're applying for a job, you don't know who to apply to, you can put the department that's going to, for example, Human Resources or Customer Service Department. The 5th paragraph there, number 5, is the opening paragraph, and that outlines the issue that you're going to be covering in the letter. Be very careful not to include too much detail. At this point, you're merely directing the reader to the issue at hand. Number 6 is the remaining body paragraphs. This only has one. You may have 2 or 3. You want to go into detail about the problem issue. You don't want to have more than one paragraph. You may have more than one paragraph. Your letter should not exceed more than 1 page in total. Remember, you don't want your reader to get bored and stop reading. Your last paragraph, number 7 on this one, is a call to action. This, you should make it clear that what you hope to accomplish with this letter. Finish by thanking the reader for his or her time and including some contact information. And then you want to end with a closing. It should be polite but professional. So here's the sincerely. Remember, business on personal note. Make sure you sign the letter. And then number 9 is your name. And we'll end for there today. We'll pick this up again tomorrow, looking at key question 9, what you have to do, some ideas, as well as reading chapter 9 in the novel as well. So I'll pick this again tomorrow. Thanks everyone for calling in and listening in and joining me. Any questions, let me know. Till then, miigwech, and bye for now. What I love about Sunday, sing along as the choir sways, every verse of Amazing Grace, and then we shake the preacher's hand, go home into your blue jeans, have some chicken and some baked beans, pick a backyard football team.